Okay guys, welcome back to the channel. It is Mizuno ES21 wedge testing day. It's a pretty interesting kind of idea. So I think people are familiar with high toe and Callaway PM and these ones, clubs and wedges that move the CG out high in toe side just to stabilize it. So this one's interesting because at address, it doesn't look like that.
It looks certainly less like that, less
like
of that than any of the other ones, and you know, in true Mizuno fashion, they're trying to retain some of that kind of appeal, that visual that Mizuno are obviously known for. So making that wedge to look like that's not really them.
No, it wouldn't have been them. Now, from the back, obviously, and looking at the back and the sole, that's where it is definitely noticeable that it's not your normal wedge. It's kind of bulky because it's hollow, but they've hidden that sort of internal construction. They've moved the CG out there by making it hollow, and it's really just the heel part that's hollow and the other part is solid?
That's right, yeah, exactly it. So the eternal struggle for wedge makers has been to offset the length of the hosel.
Right.
So trying to pull that center gravity closer to the point where you're actually likely to hit it, which is for most people center to toe of center, trying to minimize in the same fashion we do it with any club, the deflection, the variation in spin and launch and ball speed and all those things. Having the center of mass closer to the point where you're actually striking it is just beneficial for everyone.
One thing I said, I think this is designed to be a bit more of a forgiving wedge for a higher handicap range.
Yeah.
But even really nice wedges you were hitting, the strike point was a little bit towards the toe. And that's what most good players will even have the same strike pattern. You'll see it a little bit towards the toe side.
Absolutely.
And so when the wedge is, I guess, moving less at impact, it stays on the face longer, and that's their thinking should make the spin get retained better. Is that basically
exactly
the idea?
it? That's trying to cut down that variation shot to shot. And Mizuno, I've obviously said with this that this is their most consistent performed wedge they've ever made.
Interesting.
Yes, enhanced spin, enhanced not so much on the best one you make, best swing you make and best shot you hit, but just the other times the drop-offs are less.
Yeah, it's kind of like what we talk about with drivers. Like there's a lot of drivers that are at the dead center of the face, a lot of them are around the same speed, great results, but as you move around the face, certain ones are better than others. And that wedge should be, versus a blade wedge, like we have the T20 here, it's not really very forgiving. If you're going to miss it, you're going to get fall-offs in either direction.
Yeah, and sometimes I give people a T20 and they go, I would love to be able to play this. I just feel intimidated by it. I feel like I'm going to give something up versus my cavity back iron you've just fit me into. And whereas I think this would fit the bill a little bit easier. It kind of almost has the look of a cavity back wedge in this category with CBX2 and some of the other ones that we have. I mean, maybe a little bit more Pin Glide-esque.
I agree.
And its look.
It looks a little bit more like that.
It's got a bit more of that to it.
Black finish is really nice. It comes with, we don't have it here, but it's the same shaft. It's the high rev shaft, but they have the full black version. So it's cool. It is very Mizuno-ish in that sense.
It is. Well, let's give it a little hit and see if it does what it says.
Yeah, let's see a few. So 85 yards, this is a 56-degree wedge. This is a partial speed for you. But
yeah, a little 3/4, 56.
But I think that represents the speed that it'll get hit at for the range of players. They're probably hitting it around 90 yards or so. That sounded good. That's dancing.
So we'll kind of keep an eye strike-wise. So 3 millimeters toe, 10 millimeters low, really in a nice spot for a wedge.
I was going to say that's effectively the middle of the face for a wedge. Don't really want to hit it too high in the face or it's going to launch higher and spin less, I guess.
Absolutely.
Nice, nearly identical, eh? Okay, so here we go. You want to do a video with only 2 shots hit? You can do it now. Okay, shot 1. This is hilarious. So shot 1, let's call it dead center.
Yeah.
Right? Great result, what, 10,064 spin, 29.8
That's
watch.
a lot for me with a partial.
That's as good as it's going to be. Yeah, without, you're not opening the face, you're not cutting across it, you're not doing anything special.
I mean, I'm literally, when I was warming up, I was trying to get as neutral as I could possibly get it.
And that's perfect because you don't need someone in the 10 to 20 handicap range, doesn't need to be getting too crazy. A nice straight face, solidly struck wedge is going to be more consistent than trying to go too nuts with it. So the second one, you struck a little bit in the toe. 11 millimeters in the toe.
Yeah.
and it actually spun a bit more.
Yeah, so those flipped over a little bit, so it wasn't quite as low, more in the toe.
That's pretty interesting.
And it stayed very consistent within, what, 2.2 of a degree?
It's 0.2 of a degree. It was 29.8 before. So, I mean, for the sample size of one, that is a perfect example, because a normal wedge, if it was struck a bit higher and a bit more toe, would launch more like 31-ish and spin at like 9 maybe, something like that.
Yeah.
That sounded crisp too, eh? So that was almost identical to your last strike, within 1 millimeter, and you spun it almost exactly the same. You just launched it like a fraction lower.
Okay.
It's really cool. Your first 3 shots are within 3 feet of each other for proximity. They were plus or minus 2 in height.
Yeah, we love that standard deviation kind of
crazy tight, isn't it?
Just to see how tight that gets, and across the board, that's pretty tight. Well, do we want to do the same test with a T20, call it from the same family?
You know what? Let's try that. So that's 3 shots consecutive. Let's just go right into 3 shots with T20. Let's just see what happens. Nice. Nice.
7, that should be a 5 spin.
Yep. All right, so we hit a ton of shots with both. We kind of went back and forth, what, 4 or 5 times? Something like that. We were a little picky with which shots we kept, just to make sure we had an equal comparison of strikes.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, is a small sample size, like the first 3 shots we hit with each.
Yeah.
We're going to see similar stuff, maybe subtle differences, but in a sample size that small, we're probably not going to be able to know for sure what's happening. But as we continue to hit, we were much more firm in our belief that, you know, that one, the ES21 was more consistent on spin on the misses. The variation was way lower.
It was way lower. Actually, it's funny you say that. That makes a lot of sense. So few shots, not a ton. 10, 20 shots, a fair amount.
Yeah.
What about 1,000 shots?
Seasons.
Because you're hitting,
years.
How many wedge shots do you hit per round if you play 50 rounds?
Yep.
So maybe the standard deviation over the course of a season could be over 1,000 RPMs, could be 1,500, and that's several yards, that's several feet, that's less putts you make. It'll add up.
I mean, really, what it comes down to, when you look at the stats, proximity with wedges may be the lowest of the low-hanging fruit when it comes to lowering your score.
True. Get the ball closer to the hole, get up and down.
Exactly. So if spin plays its part in that, other things, obviously, delivery play their part, and more consistency for the way I play it. I know I get in trouble with my wedges when my ball starts on-line or right. If my ball starts slightly left, I'm really like, I know exactly what's happening, because I like just to see that ball fall to the right.
Fall to the right. So you want to start just left, and I think that's the case with most amateurs that are missing their wedge shots. They'll be leaving the face way open. They'll be missing it right and short.
Yeah.
If there's something in this that's kind of helping them deliver, however that's working, and there's a couple different explanations I can see on the website of how, you know, the center of gravity or whatever might help with that.
Yep.
But the reality is, if it gets the ball started a little bit more on line, your proximity should be lower on average. What would be, so if I'm looking at this, I would go, what's the disadvantage of that wedge versus, like, the T20 is a very player's wedge. Is it similar to when we talk about irons? What's the disadvantage of a game improvement cavity versus a blade? What's the disadvantage between, like, the biggest, most forgiving drivers and sort of the more players' shapes? Are we talking about the same kind of thing? If you're not playing really kind of low handicapper special shots with the wedge, if you're not going to do that, then you're just going to end up more consistent with something like an ES21?
Absolutely. I think, the more your delivery varies.
Delivery varies. Okay, that's a good point.
The more kind of you will need a technology like this.
So that's an important point, because your delivery doesn't really vary.
Yeah.
So you have really consistent wedge. I'm just looking at your path numbers and everything. So you're basically 0 all the time, and you're 6 or 7 down, which is really nice for hitting wedge shots. If someone's mixing in, you know, some are in to out, some are out to in, Some are steep, some are less steep.
Yep.
That construction of that club is just going to give you a similar looking shot more often. Is that basically what it is?
Yeah, much more standard, or just much tighter standard deviation, so that the miss is better.
The miss is better. And the reality is, I mean, how many wedge shots will a 20 handicap hit perfectly the way they want in a round? It might be 0.
I know.
So whatever you get out of it is kind of, that's how you're playing golf to a better level. Get the ball closer to the hole.
Yeah, I think we liked the S18 and the head profile it had, a bit more mid-size. That reminds me of the mid-size profile of that. So I think a lot of people will like the footprint of ES21. Sometimes T20 can be a little intimidating, like we talked about earlier on. So
very blade-like, right?
Yeah, definitely. And one of the smaller, more compact pear shapes. The players love them.
It's a great looking club.
And at times, as we talked about earlier, the higher handicapper looks and goes, oh, that looks like a little bit of work, that.
And that's how they feel about, if you gave a mid-handicapper blade irons, which you never would, they would say the same thing. Like, I don't really have confidence in that. I want something that will help me out if I don't hit it perfect.
Exactly.
Well, probably won't be the last time we test those. You know what might be cool is to throw those in with like CBX and Glide Forge and those and see what we're talking about. I do think it's a different way of going about it, but I would imagine the result is maybe somewhat similar.
Absolutely. And maybe an easier, like compared to those wedges you just talked about, an easier way to continue your set. So going from a cavity back or a more generous, into, and that goes all the way to the approach wedge for most people.
Yeah, it does.
Because these don't start, there is no approach wedge in ES21.
No, so that's a good point. The the lowest lofted one you can get is 54.
54, so strong sand wedge. It goes up to 60.
Goes up to 62 really if you wanted
62,
it. In the one you have. The wide sole just goes up to 60.
Yep.
So it's a good point. This isn't a gap wedge.
No.
So you might even argue you're never making 100% swing with these.
Yep.
Partials only.
A lot of just partial swings.
All right. Well, definitely more on this in the future.
More to come, and obviously they have their own version of the sort of hydrophobicity to the face, the water wicking the moisture,
micro grooves.
Repelling grooves. So it might be time to dig out the wet wedge test once again.
There's definitely been demand to revive that.
Yeah.
We can maybe throw in the different finishes of golf balls is one we haven't done with moisture yet.
Yep.
So maybe wet wedge version 2 could be coming up.
2020, we haven't done it this year.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the predictable and consistent thing the conditions would add to that, wouldn't it? Like,
absolutely.
Will that perform the same every time versus something like that raw wedge there?
Which is the name of the game with the ES21. It's just trying to get every shot to be the same regardless of the strike or the conditions.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, well, I think a bit of good feedback from you guys would you be willing to play the wedge? It's a little unusual looking. I'm not sure how many people have seen it in the shop, but is your first impression of it such that you'd be willing to give it a shot? I'd be curious what people think. It's definitely different. It's very different.
Mizuno were conscious of that when they talked to us in the product launch, was that on the shelf, it may raise a few eyebrows. Put it down the playing position, probably less so. You'd probably be, okay, that looks familiar.
It's probably the best looking of a game improvement wedge at address.
Yeah.
The Cleveland's looks really good. They all really look quite nice, but it certainly isn't off-putting when you put it down in the playing position.
Far from it.
Which is the most important thing anyway.
Yeah, definitely.
Great. Cool. Okay. All right. Well, that is the ES21 wedge. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon.